at all. However, investigators never pursued this lead by testing workers from garment factories or shippers involved in handling JonBenét's clothing. After all, this would be requiring them to go above and beyond, and admittedly, this would be a lot. But there are weaknesses to the touch DNA. The touch DNA, while useful in some cases, is extremely fragile and often can be considered incomplete. Partial DNA profiles, like the one in this case, are easily degraded and prone to contamination. This raises the possibility that the DNA on JonBenét's clothing was deposited long before the crime scene took place. The assault and DNA's role. The autopsy report revealed signs of body trauma in certain private places. Yet, we don't really have good record of matching DNA found internally in the body. This absence raises the possibility that such an assault was staged rather than committed by a stranger or anyone for that matter. However, without additional evidence, this is just speculation. However, if you'd indulge me for just a second, I want to drive home the point of the complexity of the unidentified male DNA so that we understand the importance of taking a step back and being critical of every angle, even if we have our own minds made up. The nature of the unidentified male DNA found on JonBenet Ramsey's clothing highlights the complexities and limitations of interpreting touch DNA evidence. This evidence, characterized as touch DNA, raises significant questions about how it was deposited and its evidentiary value. Its presence suggests contact, but not necessarily forceful or aggressive interaction. Instead, it may indicate incidental or casual contact, possibly in a non-aggressive or even social context. This interpretation aligns with the absence of corroborative DNA evidence, such as stronger DNA traces under JonBenet's fingernails, an area typically involved in defensive actions during physical altercation. The findings by Van Oorschot and Cahill, articles written in 2019 and 2024 respectively, shed light on the intricate dynamics of DNA transfer in forensic context. On one hand, Van Oorschot discusses the sensitivity of DNA transfer, highlighting how even brief or indirect contact can leave detectable traces. This may undermine the assumption that the presence of DNA always signals direct involvement in a crime. Additionally, Cahill builds on this by exploring how DNA can be passively transferred between individuals or objects in social settings, often without direct interaction. Their study illustrates scenarios in which touch DNA might be deposited on clothing or personal items through secondary or indirect transfer, such as during routine social interactions or environmental contact. The ambiguity of the male DNA on JonBenet's clothing raises questions about its connection to the crime. If it had been deposited during a violent or aggressive act, one might expect stronger corroborative evidence, such as visible injuries or the same DNA found under JonBenet's fingernails. The lack of such markers makes it plausible that the DNA originated from an unrelated, non-aggressive interaction or was introduced later due to contamination. Mishandling and contamination are critical considerations, especially in complex crime scenes. Both Van Oorschot and Cahill emphasize how insufficient evidence handling protocols can lead to foreign DNA being introduced post-collection. The Cahill study, in particular, highlights how environments with multiple individuals interacting with the same items can exponentially increase contamination risks. In JonBenet's case, mishandling by crime scene personnel or contamination during laboratory processing could explain the presence of male DNA, especially given its delicate and fragmentary nature, not to mention what happened in the household before it goes to the lab. Furthermore, the relatively weak state of the DNA evidence provides important context to consider. A struggle or violent encounter would likely leave stronger biological evidence such as blood or other bodily fluids, or maybe more substantial DNA evidence. For instance, robust DNA traces under JonBenet's fingernails would align with a defensive struggle. The lack of such critical evidence, such as blood being under the fingernails, might support the idea that the DNA found on her clothing might have originated from a more casual interaction or secondary transfer, which might lead us to believe that JonBenet had no clue what was coming. In some explanations from some people who work on the case, it is believed that the DNA under her fingernails was old and degraded and had probably been there for days. Ultimately, the unidentified male DNA remains a significant but inconclusive piece of evidence. Its characteristics, such as touch DNA, its location, and its lack of corroboration, seem to underscore the challenges of interpreting DNA evidence in absence of a clear context. This case, for example, exemplifies the broader challenges in forensic science, particularly the interpretation of touch DNA and the risks of contamination in complex crime scene investigations. To gain a deeper understanding of the DNA, we might look at the types of DNA for more clarity. Number one, you have nuclear DNA, which we might call regular DNA. And this is the standard DNA that comes from the nucleus of a cell and contains genetic material inherited from both parents. It's most commonly found in blood, skin cells, saliva, and other bodily fluids. In forensic cases, nuclear DNA is the primary target for identifying individuals because it can generate a full DNA profile. Number two might be touch DNA. Touch DNA is a subset of nuclear DNA, but refers specifically to the small amounts of DNA left behind when someone touches or comes into contact with an object or a surface. It's typically made up of skin cells shed from the surface of the skin. Touch DNA is often low quality and highly susceptible to degradation or contamination. And then three, we have mitochondrial DNA. This DNA comes from the mitochondria of cells and is inherited exclusively from the mother. It's useful when nuclear DNA is degraded or unavailable, for example, in hair shafts with roots, bones, or teeth. Mitochondrial DNA wasn't the focus in JonBenet's case. In JonBenet Ramsey's case, the unidentified male DNA was nuclear DNA consistent with touch DNA, which are skin cells found in small amounts. On her undergarments, there was a partial male profile. Under her fingernails, the trace male DNA was partial in its profile. And on the long johns, the touch DNA matched the unidentified male profile as we understand it. The presence of DNA on these specific areas raises questions about direct contact versus the secondary indirect transfer method that we talked about before. Because no other traces of this DNA were found elsewhere at the scene, forensic experts debate its significance. It could reflect prior contamination, innocent contact, or an as of yet unidentified person involved in the events leading to JonBenet's death. We've gone over a lot, so in conclusion, The JonBenet Ramsey case remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of our time. From the cryptic ransom note to the limited presence of unidentified DNA, every piece of evidence seems to raise more questions than answers. However, when viewed collectively, these elements point toward the possibility of a coordinated effort to mislead investigators. 9 News reported a story when they talked about the DNA in this case being in doubt. Experts, mostly college professors, described the DNA as uninformative and not definitive of an intruder being responsible for JonBenet's death. They mentioned that while there is the presence of foreign DNA, that presence of foreign DNA could easily be accounted for by other mechanisms and explanations. Furthermore, these experts have doubts that the DNA profile is that of a single individual and can actually be a mixture of DNA from 2 to 3 individuals. This would cause an issue in their minds because this would drive law enforcement to look for someone who doesn't even exist. And according to experts and the former mayor of Boulder, Colorado, this is something that they believe that District Attorney Mary Lacey knew before she exonerated the Ramseys. That is, she knew the DNA was inconclusive. However, she decided to move forward with exonerating them anyway. Therefore, it's important for us to continue to examine the timeline, to examine the arrival of friends, the Christmas plans, and the DNA evidence to continue to uncover inconsistencies that challenge the official narrative given by the Ramsey family. Whether these anomalies indicate an intruder's involvement or an elaborate cover-up, one thing remains clear. The answers to JonBenet's tragic death lie hidden within these details. Well, that's all for now. That's the video. Like, share, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what you think. And until next time, take it easy.